A newly retired woman thought that she was helping her daughter during an emergency. Less than an hour later, 15,000 of her retirement savings was gone. And the worst part, that voice that she trusted wasn't even her daughter's voice. Now here's why this is important to every parent and grandparent watching this video. The FBI has tracked over 2,500 families hit by this exact tactic in the last 12 months. And these are smart people. The average loss is over $11,000, and those are just the ones who reported it. Most families never come forward because they're too embarrassed. So the real number is way bigger than what the FBI even sees. But I don't want you to worry, because there's one word that you need to say if this ever happens to you so that you can shut these criminals down immediately. And in this video, I'm going to reveal how these criminals pulled this off, why everyday people like you are falling victim, and the one word that shuts this entirely down. I'm Clewis, internationally recognized cybersecurity expert, and this is the Scam Report. So who is this woman? Her name is Sharon Brightwell. She's a 70-year-old grandmother living down in Florida. Now, before I tell you what happened, there's something really important that you need to know about Sharon. At the time that this took place, her husband was dealing with some serious health issues. Now, if you've ever had a spouse dealing with health problems, or you've been responsible for caring for someone that you love, then you already know that takes a lot out of you. You're worried about their doctor's appointments, their medication, and whether they're going to be okay. So Sharon was already carrying a lot before this phone call even came in. Then, on one day in July of 2025, her phone rang. She looked down and saw what appeared to be her daughter April's number on the caller ID, so she naturally answered the phone. But what she heard next got her attention immediately. The person on the other end was crying and saying that they had been in a terrible car accident. According to Sharon, the caller explained that she had been texting while driving and hit another vehicle, and the police had taken her phone. Now, when I first read this story, one of those statements from Sharon jumped off the page immediately. She later told reporters, "I know my daughter's cry." Think about that for a moment. Sharon wasn't talking about recognizing a voice on a voicemail. She was talking about her own daughter, the child that she raised from a baby. And why would she not recognize that voice? So when Sharon heard that crying on the phone, she wasn't trying to determine whether somebody was telling the truth. She believed she was talking to her daughter. She was trying to figure out how she could help her. Now here's where things go from bad to worse. A few moments later, another person got on the phone, a man, and he introduced himself as an attorney, and he told Sharon he was handling April's case. He explained that the accident was serious and that her daughter was facing legal trouble because she was texting and driving when this accident had happened. Now, as the conversation continued, the attorney told Sharon that immediate action was needed. According to him, $15,000 was required to secure April's release and keep the situation from becoming even more serious. Now, put yourself in Sharon's situation right now. She believes, as she's just heard her daughter crying, she believes her daughter has been involved in a serious accident, and now she's talking to someone who sounds like a professional, explaining exactly what needs to happen next to get her out of this situation. At that point, Sharon isn't questioning the process. She's thinking about her daughter, and now how can she get her the help that she needs. But what happens next is probably the worst part of this process. Real quick, before we go any further, this part of this video is sponsored by Webroot, and I actually use this myself, so listen up and pay very close attention. Just about everything I show you on this channel has one thing in common. These criminals are counting on one moment when you're not fully paying attention. One tap, one click, one connection on the wrong network. So let's be real, you can't be alert every second of the day. And that's the whole point of having protection that stays awake when you don't. That's where Webroot Total Protection comes in. It's always on security for your device, your identity, running quietly in the background while you live your life. You get lightning fast antivirus and a password manager. You get a VPN, so when you're on public Wi-Fi at the airport, the hotel, or the coffee shop, nobody on that network can watch what's going on your device. You also get unlimited cloud backups, so your photos, your documents, and your family memories are safe, even if your device is lost or stolen. And here's why that part matters to me. It comes to identity protection, including up to $1 million in fraud expenses, reimbursements, plus 24/7 support if something ever goes wrong. This isn't some new name that nobody's heard of. Webroot is ranked #1 against big names like Norton, McAfee, and Bitdefender. They've been using AI-powered threat detection for over 15 years, long before it was a buzzword. The scans run 7 times faster and take up 3 times less space on your device, so you barely know it's there. It's got a 93% customer satisfaction rate, and it's trusted by millions of people for a reason. So here's what I want you to do. Click the link in the description and get yourself protected today. Get access to the best prices you'll find anywhere. Protecting your money and your identity shouldn't be complicated, and with Webroot, it isn't. So get it set up and then come right back to this video. So this is exactly what Sharon does. She thinks about where the money is. Like, she doesn't have $15,000 just lying around in the account, but she thinks she has access to her retirement funds. So she goes to the bank and withdraws $15,000 from her retirement account. Then she made arrangements to deliver those funds to who she believed was an associate of the attorney. Now, we're talking about cash, not a bank transfer, not a wire, cash. As far as what Sharon knew, she wasn't handing money to a criminal. She believed she was helping her daughter through a legal emergency. And that's what truly makes this story so heartbreaking. Every decision that Sharon made that day was based on the belief that her child was in trouble and that she had the ability to help her. Now, if you think losing $15,000 was the end of this story, it ain't. Almost immediately after getting the money, they came back for more. Now, according to Sharon, this is where the story got even worse. The callers claimed that the woman involved in the car accident had lost her baby. Now they're talking about lawsuits and legal action. They were now saying April could be facing even more serious consequences than before. And just like before, they had one solution for it. And I'm pretty sure you can guess what it is. Money. Yes, more money. But this time, a bigger amount. They needed $30,000 this time. Now think about that. What this tells us about these criminals. The first $15,000 they got wasn't enough. Once they realized that Sharon believed the story, they simply increased the pressure and raised the price. They had already convinced her that her daughter was in trouble. Now they were trying to convince her that the trouble had gotten worse. Now, from Sharon's perspective, this story made sense because she was still operating under the same belief that she had been from the very beginning. She believed her daughter needed her help. But this time something didn't feel right, and Sharon's spidey sense started tingling. And pretty soon, I'm going to give you the one word that you need that shuts this down completely so you don't have to rely on spidey sense. So instead of immediately making arrangements to send more money, she reached out to her grandson and explained exactly what was happening. And thank God she did, because once her grandson and a family friend heard the story, they started asking questions, the kind of questions Sharon hadn't been asking before because she was so focused on fixing this problem for her daughter. Eventually, they encouraged her to do something super simple. Stop talking to the attorney. Stop talking to the people making demands and call April directly. Now, you might be thinking, why didn't she just call April in the first place? I have no context to the story. I don't understand their relationship, but what I do know, there is no limits to a parent's love. And that one phone call changed everything, because when Sharon finally reached out to her daughter, April had no idea what she was talking about. There had been no accident, no lawsuit, no attorney, and she had never asked her mother for a single dollar. In that moment, Sharon realized she had been manipulated from the very first phone call. Now, whenever a story like this makes the news, you'll always see people in the comments saying the same thing. I would have known. There ain't no way I would have sent that money. I know my kid's voice. I wouldn't have fallen for that. How could somebody be so gullible? But I think that's the wrong way to look at this, because Sharon wasn't tricked because she lacked intelligence. She was tricked because the criminals understood human behavior. I mean, let's look at the facts. Think about it. They didn't call her pretending to sell a warranty or to be from the IRS. They called pretending to be someone that she loved, and that's a completely different situation. When you believe a loved one is in danger, your brain starts focusing on solving the problem. You stop looking for a reason that the story might be fake and start looking for ways to help. That's exactly what happened to Sharon. By the time the money was even mentioned, she had already believed that her daughter was in trouble. The criminals had successfully shifted her attention away from verification and moved her toward action. So you might be wondering, how does any of this take place at all to begin with? This is where technology comes into play. According to investigators, criminals are increasingly using artificial intelligence, AI, to recreate voices. Yes, recreate. They can take audio from social media videos, YouTube clips, Facebook posts, TikTok videos, interviews, voicemails, and any other recordings that people share online. That audio is then used to create a synthetic version of that person's voice. And here's what makes this so dangerous. The technology doesn't have to be perfect. It only has to be convincing enough to work during a moment of panic. Remember what Sharon said, "I know my daughter's cry." All the criminals needed to do was fool a frightened mother, not a voice expert. And unfortunately, that was the key, and they succeeded. So when people ask, how could somebody fall for this? I think the better question is, how many of us would remain perfectly calm if we thought our child or grandchild had just called us in tears and they were asking for help? So let's talk about the warning signs. And before we do, I want to be very careful here. It's easy for us to sit here after the fact and point out all the things that Sharon should have noticed. It's a lot harder when you're the one that's getting the phone call, when you are dealing with the emotions and you're scared and trying to help someone you love. You don't always see things clearly as you do in hindsight. Nonetheless, there were several warnings in this situation that you can learn from right now. The first warning was urgency. Everything had to be done immediately. The accident, the legal trouble, the money demand, all hit her at the exact same time. And that's one of the oldest tricks these criminals use, because the moment you slow down and think, their story starts to fall apart. The second warning was isolation. Notice how Sharon never spoke directly to her daughter again after the initial phone call. Everything started to flow through this supposed attorney. The criminals control the information, the narrative, and the communication. And whenever someone is trying to prevent you from independently verifying a story, that should immediately raise concern for you. The third warning sign was the method of payment. Think about it. What legitimate attorney asks a client's mother to withdraw $15,000 in cash and hand it to an associate? When you stop and think about it, it doesn't make much sense. But again, Sharon wasn't stopping to evaluate the legal procedure. She was focused on helping her daughter. Then came what I believe to be the biggest warning sign of them all. The second request. Almost immediately after receiving the first $15,000, the criminals came back asking for another $30,000. That's important because legitimate emergencies usually get smaller as they're resolved, but the criminal stories here, they only get bigger. The accident becomes a lawsuit. The lawsuit becomes a larger payment. That payment becomes another crisis. The goal is always the same. Keep the victim emotionally engaged long enough to extract more money. So at the beginning of this video, I told you I was going to give you the one word that could have stopped this entire thing before Sharon ever withdrew a single dollar from her retirement account. And now you're about to get it. By the way, right now is the perfect time to like this video, hit that subscribe button and the red bell so that you're notified when I drop new videos. If you hit that red bell, YouTube will put all of these videos on your homepage so you never miss another protection story so that you and your family can stay protected. So grab a piece of paper, pen, write this down. You need to sit down with your family, your children, your grandchildren, and the people closest to you, anyone that you communicate with regularly, and anyone who you are willing to help out financially if they were facing a real emergency. And together, you need to create a family safe word. Yes, y'all, it's that simple. Keep it simple, keep it private. This is not something that you post on Facebook or you talk about publicly or even casually mention in conversations. This is something that stays within your family. Then, if an emergency phone call comes up, if somebody calls you claiming to be your child, your grandchild, or another loved one, and they're asking for money or your help immediately, you ask them the question, what is our family safe word? If they can't answer it, this conversation ends. It's that simple. When I look at Sharon's story, I can't help but wonder how different things might have been if her family had a process like that in place to begin with. One question could have saved her $15,000 and prevented $30,000 from the second demand and exposed the entire operation before it ever got off the ground. Well, that's it for this video. I'm Clewis, internationally recognized cybersecurity expert, author, and speaker, and I'll see you on the next video next week. Peace.